This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, when does constitutional reform become a power grab? Zimbabwe's ruling party moves to rewrite the constitution, keeping the president in office 2 years longer and taking the choice of his successor away from voters. But opposition to the plan is suppressed. More than 5,000 people are said to have been targeted with violence for dissenting, including one victim who tells us his story. Also coming up, Kenya's motorbike riders feel the squeeze as fuel prices surge across Africa. But a quiet shift is underway in Nairobi, with electric bikes keeping the city moving while petrol pumps run low. Hello, I am Tomi Oladipo and you're welcome to the show. In Zimbabwe, the ruling ZANU-PF party is pushing through a major rewrite of the constitution. And it's the kind of rewrite that changes who holds power and for how long. At the heart of it is President Emmerson Mnangagwa. His second and final term is meant to end in 2028. Under these proposals, he'd stay on until 2030. But the bill goes further than that. It would stretch the election cycle from 5 years to 7 for presidency, parliament and local councils. It would also take the choice of president out of the hands of voters altogether. Instead, members of parliament would pick the head of state. ZANU-PF says 5 years simply isn't enough to plan and to deliver. They argue elections are expensive and interfere with development and that frequent campaigns fuel political violence. Parliament took the bill on the road last month for 4 days of public consultations. It was meant to be the moment ordinary Zimbabweans got to weigh in. What actually happened looked very different. The meetings were dominated by ruling party supporters. Opposition voices were shouted down or simply ignored. In Harare, things turned violent. The human rights lawyer Doug Coulthard was beaten up at one of the hearings, while opposition voices were denied the chance to speak. We put all of this to ZANU-PF. The party's information director, Farai Marapira, says they don't condone violence. In fact, he argues it's part of the reason the bill is needed in the first place.
We as ZANU-PF have spoken against violence. We've spoken against this toxicity, this intolerance of one another. And this is actually one of the vices from which we find basis for these electoral changes that we're bringing into CAP 3. This is the exact issue of intolerance for one another, which we're seeking to deal with as we bring in this amendment. The people that engage in violence of any form, be it verbal, physical, or otherwise, they are subject to the law. And we hope that and we believe our police shall apprehend those people and they'll be brought to justice.
But away from the public meetings, there are reports that something darker has been going on. One advocacy group has documented more than 5,000 people caught up in rights violations in March alone. We spoke to one opposition member. He says he was seized in broad daylight after attending a meeting to discuss the proposed amendments. To protect his identity, we're calling him Gibson.
We bundled, the two of us, we were taken by the belt. Our heads were tugged between our knees so that we could not see where we were going, both of us. And they started to brutalize us. And we were driven to a secluded place. Then from there, they took turns to beat us after putting us in a ditch. One, they wanted to know the sponsors of the anti-constitutional amendment bill number 3 way. 2, the contents of the meeting. 3, the next date of the meeting and who was supposed to attend. According to this constitution that we have currently, you have your right to choose, you have a right to express yourself in terms that you want so that you are heard and be considered in national issues. But in this case, you are actually brutalized to have a view that is not in line with the expectations of those who are in power. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening for the country, making it very clear that they are not for the people. They're just self-enriching themselves.
Let's speak now to a household name in Zimbabwean politics, Tendai Biti, politician, constitutional lawyer, and currently one of the leaders of the Constitutional Defenders Forum, an initiative campaigning against the proposed constitutional amendment. It's good to have you with us on DW. Now, just to talk about this issue, ZANU-PF says that moving the election cycle from 5 years to 7 years is about economic planning, it's about saving money on elections. What's your response to that?
It's a lot of rubbish. Election cycles all over the world are 5 years. And there's good reason for that. Regular, free and fair elections create accountability, create obligations, create fear, cement the social contract. So a politician who doesn't perform knows that he'll be gone and gone in no time. So the politician subject to a 5-year cycle knows that he or she must deliver and deliver as a matter of agency. So that is why 5 years are a global standard. So ZANU-PF can reinvent the wheel to justify a continued hold on to power. For Christ's sake, they've been in office since 1980. So what difference would making more years available to them when they've been there since 1980 for 46 years, and this country is underdeveloped. This country is a basket case. This country is trapped by multiple layers of poverty. So it's an argument that doesn't hold water in law, in politics, in morality, and in conscience.
You've been in Zimbabwean politics for a long time. You've even been in government at a point. What do you think is the reasoning behind this move?
The primary reason, of course, is to hold on to power for as long as possible. But behind that is the conflation of power and looting. The conflation of power and kleptocracy. This regime is now owned by cartels, syndicates and bandits that control the fuel sector, that control the public procurement sector, that control road construction, that control the energy sector. It is these cartels that are running the show, and it is these cartels that want Mr. Mnangagwa to hold on to power for as long as possible. It is this cartel that want to succeed Mr. Mnangagwa, but they know that they are not electable, which is why one of the proposed amendments is to alter and change the way we elect our president from an electoral college of 17 million Zimbabweans who are above 18 to an electoral college of a mere 280 people that can be bought, that can be bribed, that can be intimidated. So the term extension agenda is inextricably tied to the aggrandizement agenda, looting for the sake of looting. And that is the reality.
There's already been a public consultation on this issue. Why are you not happy with that exercise?
That exercise was a sham. In 2013, we wrote a new constitution. There were over 4,500 public meetings, public consultations that spanned over 3 years. In the current process, there have been 67 meetings held over 2 days. The average number of people who gave evidence or testimony in those meetings across the length and breadth of Zimbabwe, the average in a meeting was 80 people. So these are sham consultations. And by the way, there was violence at those meetings. People were shut out at those meetings. People were intimidated. The ruling party, ZANU-PF, made sure that The meetings took place in small venues. They made sure that their people would literally sleep in those venues. The biggest meeting was held at the City Sports Center in Harare. In front of world cameras, in front of international diplomats, we were shut out from speaking. People were assaulted, including a lawyer by the name of Doug Coltart. If this could happen in the capital city, you can imagine what was happening in rural Zimbabwe, where some people were so assaulted. Gilbert Mtebuki in Chiredzi is fighting for his life as I'm talking to you right now. So this was an organized, systematic a means of denying people their right to speak. I lead the Constitutional Defense Forum. We have not been allowed to have a single meeting. Even private meetings in our offices are being banned. So this is ridiculous, but this is the reality of the present day government.
You were even detained in connection with this debate. Can you just give us a brief
I was
summary
arrested.
of what happened to you? And
so on the 21st of March 2026, I drove to Mutare, Zimbabwe's fifth largest city. It's a border town with Mozambique, to have a meeting with our members. It was a private meeting in a very small room. We were less than 10 people in there. They arrested me, detained me for 2 days with our organizer, Morgan Ngube. They took my passport. I was granted bail, but I'm not allowed to hold a public meeting. I'm not allowed to move. Now they want a title deed to my house, just over a meeting, a lawful meeting in a private place. They poisoned me in prison, injected something in me, and I had to go to South Africa to get detoxified. So it's ridiculous. And my own doctor told me that they injected something to me that must have been so strong, that must have come from China. Fortunately, it was stale and old. And that's why the only reason why I'm alive today.
You've been in Zimbabwean politics for a long time. You've seen many hurdles like this, even experienced, as you mentioned, the personal cost as well. I'm just wondering, this current fight you're on, how realistic you think it is, and how you think you can win it.
Well, I think that we have already won because we've exposed them. We have exposed them for what they truly are. There's no question about it. They've failed to control the narrative. We control the narrative. So whatever they do to use force, they've lost it. Each time, to each person they've denied a microphone. To each person they've beaten up. This process has been exposed for what it is, a fraud. So we will continue fighting peacefully, democratically, and constitutionally. We'll continue celebrating the rule of law and constitutionalism, but we'll continue raising the stakes. We'll continue isolating them. We'll continue protecting our zones of autonomy. We'll continue building and sustaining this credible alternative view to their views. What we are missing are three things. We need regional voices. We need the region to act. We need President Cyril Ramaphosa to act. We need the Southern African Development Community to act before there is an implosion. We expect the European Union to pay attention of what is happening, not just in Zimbabwe. In Tanzania, Tundu Lissu has been in prison for more than a year. In Uganda, the election has been stolen. My friend Bobby Wine is in exile. Dr. Kizza Besigye has now spent 2 years in prison. So we appeal to the international community to go back to its reset settings and draw the lines against autocracy in the Southern African region, in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, in Tanzania, even to the north of Kenya. South Sudan is a disaster. Sudan is a disaster. The world can't keep on ignoring those places. There are more people dying in Sudan and South Sudan than those that have died in Ukraine or Iran combined. But Africa is on the back burner, and nobody takes attention of Africa. I don't think that's good enough.
Tendai Biti, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for speaking to us on DW News.
Thank you, Danky. Thank you.
If you think energy prices are high now, the World Bank has a sobering warning. Figures could jump by another 24% by the end of the year. That's, of course, mainly a result of the war in the Middle East, which has effectively shut down the world's most vital oil transit route. Now, while many African countries are struggling with dry pumps and rising costs, Kenya's capital, Nairobi, is finding a workaround. As DW's Felix Maringa reports, the city is moving away from the pump and looking to locally generated energy to power its growing fleet of electric motorbikes.
Fuel prices have shot up in Nairobi. The motorcycle taxi riders or boda bodas are among the many that are feeling the pinch and paying the price.
We will just be incurring losses because there are customers who will not adjust to the new fuel costs. You charge them based on their previous fares, since they won't be willing to add money to their fares.
Fuel prices should be checked, stopped from going up, because fuel runs the whole economy. When fuel prices go up, business comes to a standstill, people suffer the consequences.
But this is not happening to everyone. In a city short on fuel, a growing number of riders are finding alternatives. Electric motorized units have continued running unaffected despite the surge in fuel prices and dry pumps. This does not exempt them from world's problems, but in one critical way, it shields them from direct shocks caused by the fuel shortages.
As an electric bike rider, I won't be affected. I'll still be at work like everyone else, running an electric bike, so I'm at an advantage because my work doesn't stop.
Electric bikes are more efficient compared to the petrol bikes because of the costs. The price of fuel is going up. When you compare the distance covered by the battery versus the fuel cost, the prices are still not the same. The battery is still cheaper than the price of fuel.
What began as an experiment is fast becoming everyday transport. Maintenance is simpler, running costs are lower, and adoption is rising fast. Last year, the market share more than doubled. In 2025, electric motorbikes accounted for more than 15% of new registrations in Kenya. And it's a local ecosystem driving the change. African-made electric bikes built for African roads. Spyro is the continent's largest e-bike company. Here, the fuel crisis is translating into a rapidly expanding business.
Since the start of the war, and everybody knows that war is not good for mankind, we have seen, both in terms of inquiries, in terms of the potential and actual conversion of people, more and more people now making inquiries. Then in terms of the projection, I am seeing an even higher number, close to about 40% increase in terms of our sales through the situation being there.
On Nairobi's roads, a quiet switch is being flipped. Charging networks are growing, but not fast enough. Electric bikes still cost more upfront and investment is needed. For many of Nairobi's boda boda riders, there is no doubt the future is electric and just getting started.
I'm joined now by Hitan Palmer, the Executive Director at the Electric Mission based in Johannesburg, working to accelerate the transition to sustainable mobility. It's good to have you with us, Hitan. Now, we've just seen Kenya is seeing an uptick in electric bikes as fuel prices continue to rise. Is Kenya's a unique case, or is this being replicated across the continent, whether electric bikes, electric vehicles or whatever?
Indeed. So, I think we're experiencing a mobility revolution and an energy revolution within that space. And it's no better time right now when we're looking at the energy security perspective as we're seeing all over the world. Now, in Kenya specifically and East Africa, we're seeing the use of two-wheeler type of vehicles, traditionally petrol motorcycles, that are being used for modes of transport. And what's happened in recent years, we've seen a massive shift towards electric motorcycles and the two-wheelers in that sense. And this is what is really seeing the total cost of ownership being the lower operating costs and maintenance costs that electric mobility presents. And this is what is really driving the market. What's also interesting to see in East Africa is the opportunity within these platforms to localize and have some of these homegrown solutions. So that's a fantastic story to see that is coming out of East Africa.
Right. What about elsewhere where this isn't quite picking up in the same way? Why are other countries struggling to make this transition?
Yeah, so I think it's government has to create the right enabling environment, specifically from the policy perspective. And really what has become a lighthouse for the world is Ethiopia, where the government introduced a full-on ban of fossil fuel imported vehicles in 2024. This is now catalyzed and really accelerated the deployment of electric vehicles across Ethiopia as well. And what is great is that Ethiopia itself as a country has a majority share of renewable energy electricity, which is a great benefit to powering mobility. And when you look at, the current dynamics all over the world and the threat that, energy security, specifically oil, presents, Ethiopia's government made this transition because a lot of the revenue within the country was being spent on importing fuel. So the real motive by the then National Transport Minister was then to improve the trade balance of Ethiopia and thereby reducing the expenditure for importing fuels internationally, and thereby powering mobility locally on electric vehicles through the energy that's generated locally. Right. So that's a really great fit scenario in that.
Okay. As you mentioned, a lot of importation of fuel and fuel-powered vehicles. But we've seen this makes these countries vulnerable to supply chain shocks like we've seen in the Iran war. I suppose, wouldn't that also be a problem with electric vehicles? Because a lot of countries will also be importing both the vehicles and their components. So are we not seeing a kind of shift in dependency? Because if supply chain shocks still happen globally, they will still affect the African countries with their imports.
Yeah, so Africa is losing the window of opportunity that electric mobility presents, because the global fraternity that is manufacturing these electric vehicles and their components is somewhat exploiting the resources that Africa has in its grounds, from the critical minerals and these energy transition minerals that are in the ground that are being mined and exported out of Africa, being processed there and creating these products in semi-products or finished products in vehicles and batteries and other systems. And then African countries are re-importing this. So we've really got a window of opportunity and really industrialization opportunity to seize across Africa in looking at how do we really transform and create a leapfrog opportunity within the resources in our grounds, within the human capital that we have on our continent, and the expertise that we have to really drive through, the right signals from government in the right policies to drive investment and economic development in our continent and our countries at large. Because we can really drive regional development on these mines and then processing of these minerals to drive the manufacturing of these batteries and all the other components that go into whether it's electric bicycles, electric buses, or electric cars as a whole.
I suppose you've already talked about a bit about this, the policy perspective. Maybe you could just sum it up. What should African governments be doing right now that they're not already doing in response?
Yeah, so when we look at, global countries that are really accelerating this, African countries might not have the reserves and financial balance to really incentivize this perspective. But what we realize within that is a immediate measure that African countries can adopt is the supply side mechanisms from a policy. That can be a mandate that is introduced for zero-emission vehicles across the fleet in a country, or activities such as fuel efficiency standards or vehicle emission standards, which add no cost to the government for an immediate effect. And this is what we really need to encourage the African countries to really embrace this mobility and energy transition that is at play globally.
Heton Palmer, Executive Director at the Electric Mission. Thank you very much for giving us those thoughts.
Thanks so much.
And that's it for now, but be sure to check out our other stories on dw.com/Africa or on social media. We'll leave you now with these pictures from Kenya of the homecoming of the world record marathoner Sebastian Sawe, who smashed the once inconceivable 2-hour mark at the London Marathon. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.